So welcome to Yorkshire Leaders, where we get inspired by the stories, successes and failures of the local leaders of today, and importantly, we help to inspire the leaders of tomorrow. I'm Rachel Clark, a marketing director and lifelong learner who's on a mission to learn from the leaders across our region and to share their stories to help inspire us all to take on new challenges and grow from them. Now, today's Yorkshire leader is an entrepreneur with an impressive career spanning over 35 years in the business world. He's currently serving as the Joint Managing Director of Garth West Packaging and POS. So alongside his expertise in packaging, he's also a co-founder of a pioneering virtual reality firm called VISR. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Lindsay West. Hi Lindsay, how are you?
I'm very good indeed. Rachel, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and thanks a lot for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Absolutely my pleasure.
I just wondered about, I've just done the intro and we talked a little bit about VISR and virtual reality, and I just wondered if you could give us a bit of information about that, because I know you're really passionate about technology in the region.
I guess the stuff about VISR in particular would be is that the whole initiative behind it was to actually prove that we can set up a technology, cutting edge technology business in our part of the country.
Wow.
And we have. So
I love that.
So I guess that's the main thing. So VISR is actually what we call spatial computing, also aka known as the metaverse, which is quite a broad term that seems to have stuck and has a depth of recognition probably that's greater than spatial computing. Although it must be noted that Apple, with its device, that the Apple Vision Pro, I think it's called, that's coming out next year in 2024, they've reverted to the term spatial computing. Virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR, are conduits to enter into this space, into this digital space that we now create. So virtual reality, in effect, is you take the user and you drop them into a completely different visual experience from what they actually get within the room or wherever they are that they're actually at that period of time. Augmented reality works the other way around. That gives you visibility of the space that you're in and then drops digital objects into it.
So Pokemon Go will be familiar to some people out there with children. So that's augmented reality.
Absolutely, yes. And the big thing that the big sort of technological change that's enabled this is called spatial computing. And this is the notion that the computers originally, or compute, it fakes space. So when you look at things, it can give you the illusion of three dimensions, but computers themselves didn't particularly understand space in the way that we as humans would. So with the advent of spatial compute, computers now understand the actual dimensions and the movements that we as humans make throughout space. And now that it understands that, it actually empowers us as computer users to really move into a completely different paradigm in terms of what we can, the interaction between a human and the computer itself. VR, AR, IoT, or Internet of Things devices that can pick up data and feed them back to us across the space. We're entering a completely new generation of compute and what it can actually do in terms of how it aligns with us as humans and how we use it.
And how are you sort of seeing things, in the real world? We talked a bit about gaming, and how are you seeing things in the commercial space kind of taking shape? What things is it making a difference to?
Well, I think if we sort of rewind a little bit and say why is this happening? Okay, so it's an evolution of the computer. The second biggest area is so people like you and I, Rach, are probably what we call information workers. So whilst we do quite different things, we have our PCs, we have our laptops, we have our phones, we have everything in terms of how we access computers within the working environments that make it easy for us to use them. So we probably view the world and think it's quite saturated with computers. Computers doing everything that we want them to do. On the planet, though, we only constitute a third of the workforce. 2/3 of the workforce are actually what you call frontline workers, as opposed to information workers. And what they are doing, that can be doctors, it can be nurses, it can be people working manufacturers, it can be people working in farming. They have what you call ruggedized or construction. They have ruggedized computers, which they sort of have on them and they have to stop and look at if they want to find it, or they have to stop what they're doing to go into another environment like a doctor would to actually see what the computer would say. If you can bring them data and information to their field of view when they're actually doing something, it actually liberates them and empowers them the same way that we're empowered, because it gives them really up-to-date, interesting and informative information when they actually need it, which is when they're actually doing something. So if you were CEO of one of the big tech companies and you suddenly thought, I've sold all the computers and the software I can, and you realise that there is twice as many customers out there that you haven't even started to sell it to, probably would spur you on a bit to push this technology forward, and that's really what's happening. So
yeah, absolutely. So, and is it being driven by any particular? I mean, obviously, California, we all know about the metaverse, and it's been driven from there. But equally around the world, like you say, it's got such real world benefits for so many different job roles and also countries. You're seeing it kind of. There's different hotspots around the world.
Well, the big hotspots, obviously, America is a driver. In Europe, we're not behind the curve. I mean, VISR is certainly at the front of the curve globally in terms of what we're doing. Obviously, in the Far East, China is very, very interested with regard to this, as is Japan and Korea. They're moving very fast into this space. The Middle East, again, is very interested in it, particularly with their cities of the future, like Neon and the Line. They're looking at having a full digital twin overlay of these amazing places that they're pouring trillions of dollars into to create for humans. We actually undertook at VISR with the Net Zero Technology Centre, with Microsoft, with Vodafone, the biggest proof of concept in Europe for how spatial compute would work for the energy sector. And this was the Centrica Easington site, which is very near to where we are, Rachel. Just came out, it was a £1.6 million project. And I mean, that came out with some amazing results. 35% time savings in terms of frontline workers being able to deploy their time and resources more accurately. Secondary to that, there was 1.5% saving in carbon emissions because of the fact that people weren't having to travel around as much and do things. So we are, I wouldn't say we're playing catch up per se, but we are looking at things in terms of real world applications. So if you look very much at VISR as to where that sits, is one of the key things we have is that roadmap from education through to employment. So it's at C-suite level or at director level. You're getting McKinsey coming out with the report last year saying that this is a 5.5 trillion with a T global GDP opportunity.
Yeah, I read that report this morning.
You did, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you think that's uplifted from the PwC Believing report just before the pandemic in 2019, saying it's a 1.5 trillion pound opportunity, or dollar opportunity, apologies. So there is great interest at the senior board level in terms of this technology. So we have one engagement piece there, which is actually how do we give the proper return on investment? What is the value of this technology to a business, and how does it improve productivity, ROI, as I've said, to them? On the other side of it, and very importantly, is how do we embed this into education? So we are creating the workforce of the future for the workplace of the future. So VISR has a product called Stage in our region. We have it in Bascom Bryan College near York. We have it in Bishop Burton College, which is near Beverley. And they are now actually looking at not only just the use of the technology itself, because I mean, as we know, most people like we are now at the moment on this call with Zoom, they use technology. We aren't creating Zoom, or we aren't creating different applications for what we could do with Zoom. So one is actually how do you skill people into actually just understanding that if you go to work and somebody puts you in a headset or another wearable, how to use it. The other part of it is how do you create something in that environment? And Stage enables and empowers the person in the VR, the virtual reality space, to actually build their own CAD objects or computer-aided design, virtual objects, and then create scenes and experiences within the VR space. So if we link that up with an employer, supposing they had a health and safety process that they wanted to undertake, you'd have, it's cross-skilled. You'd have someone saying procedurally, this is what we do. You'd engage with HR, you'd engage with the people who build the experience, digitally twin what the business itself is doing, and then you'd be able to deploy that in training or assessment techniques with your staff, and that's just the starting point.
And Lindsay, I know you're really passionate about the education piece, like you say, helping and creating the workforce of the future assisted by technology. And do you want to talk a bit about, I know you founded, you're like a founding member of a local
I sit on the board
organisation.
Of the Yorkshire Leaders Institute of Technology, and that has 2 universities, 8 colleges in this region. And this is an initiative which is actually how do we upskill through new technologies to empower students when they leave education to have a better, enhanced career opportunities when they leave, and then link that up with employers. I think as well, there is another thing as well, which is really, really important for employers to look at, which is, we're just at GCSE level now, bizarrely enough, when you get to my age, we're having the first generation coming through that who have been weaned on the smartphone. So there is a high tech expectation from younger people coming up now, that when they go into jobs, that they do expect technology to be part of that job. And if you look then regionally across our part of the country, so we have an incredible heritage of and culture of making things, of farming, of fishing. Generationally, this goes back. We're very innovative. We're great people. We're very entrepreneurial. What we want to do is encapsulate all of those skill sets that have been built up over multi-generations, and then in order to attract and keep our young people in the region, not if they don't want to, if they want to leave, that's fine, but a lot of them, about 40% of them would stay if the career opportunities were here, is to wrap around the tech-enabled world into the traditional jobs and say, well, actually, everything that you want is here.
Lindsay, I know you're so passionate about it, and I know you've got sort of grown-up children now, but how did you first start getting involved with the education space and kind of inspiring other younger people to thrive in the region, really? Because like you say, there's a lot of people that do think, well, I'd love to stay nearer home, or I could afford to stay nearer home if the right jobs were here. It's something I'm really passionate about as someone who's been away to London and then eventually came home.
First, if we just, so I was on the board of the Humber Lab. So first, if you just look at
LEP, the local
enterprise partnership, yeah. So, and that's when it was the Humber Lab. That's now split into 2, the Hull and East Yorkshire Lab and the Greater Lincolnshire Lab. So this is when we're looking at the whole of the Humber region as an economic zone. For any part of the country, particularly at the northern parts of the country, the importance of young people staying is that they are the future economy. If you lose all your young people, have an ageing population, you've got no younger people to do all the stuff that we need them to do. So that's, I'm not saying I'm being purely mercenary on that, but within a generational ecosystem, you do need the old and the young to create a thriving community. The other thing as well that is very important to me is that a lot of the opportunities for young people in some of the areas, particularly in technology or software development, there aren't opportunities here for them. If you look at the global opportunities and the ways that we can grow our regional economies, it's really important because of the high skill sets and actually the brilliance of the people in our area. We need to retain more of them here, and we need to give them entrepreneurial opportunity and wrap skill sets around them to really encourage them to stay here. That's what they want to do. And on the other side of it is actually to say to young people, we're creating the businesses that you can work for. If you want to go to London, or you want to go to San Francisco, or wherever, or Tokyo, or wherever you want to go, that's great. But more importantly, if you want to stay here, because it's a great quality of living and space, and Yorkshire's God's own county and all of that, and it really is. Why not? Why not stay here?
And surely enabled by technology and all the changes that we've had anyway. Remote working and hybrid working, and
very
should be able to cater to those people that want to thrive, but also
and I think
in the area.
And I think as well that's really important is that it does make a difference. So I guess one of the things VISR was born out of these platform video game events that I used to run in Hull that would get about 6,500 people to them. And there's a big element of that on focus on video games and education. So what I really love about it is video games bring the 2 strands of education together. So you get maths and physics on one side and you get the creative arts on the other. Both have to come together to create a good piece of video game content.
So true. And I can see Steve Jobs behind you, who's kind of, that would be a great prime example of bringing creativity and tech together.
Yes, very much so, yeah. He himself understood, the power of utility, as that quote said. You want to make something attractive, beautiful, and everything. It has to work really well. And I guess if you rip that right back, a coder who's making code is not very attractive to a user. You need to bring someone else in that to overlay it with something that makes it really attractive. And it can be a video game, or it can be a piece of an immersive experience for VISR. So a user will engage with something that is appealing to them.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really good. And I think that, you do tend to find in life that people with those two different mindsets, birds of a feather a bit. You do tend to, people are very scientific. It is just as creative and innovative as the creative artistic side, but they tend to sort of maybe plan together a little bit as you get the artistic types. And I think that's the beauty of the video game, that the two have to come together, and so you hopefully get a real big bang of creativity that comes from the two of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, Yorkshire's quite a powerhouse, if you like, for gaming, isn't it?
There's lots of very good video game companies here. The relevance of video games going forward, so again, just maybe rewinding a little bit to the educational side, is that one of the things is that, say you as an employer, Rachel, one of the things that you're looking for, I would suspect, is when you want to employ people, is critical thought. Okay, so you today would have made probably 100 decisions on things, maybe even not noticed you're making decisions, but running a business, you do that.
It's the benefit of getting older.
Well,
you're making them faster, hopefully.
There is exactly, and there's experience. So, but when you create a video game, so I think it is with Grand Theft Auto, which is one of the biggest selling titles, British-made game, has about 45 million player choices within it. And if you're creating that game, you have to look at, if the player does this, these 3 things or these 10 things might happen. And you have to present to the player then the way that they can quickly sort of assess those options, then pick one in their game choice. So you today, when you've been making your choices, or whatever they were today, you will immediately, your brain will run through, right, if I say yes to that, no to that, if I do this, what are the options? And you pick the most optimal one. And yes, there's experience that comes from that, but also there's the underpinning of knowledge that if you do something, there isn't just one outcome. And the quicker we all as humans understand that and can assess what those options could be, and they can have positive, negative, or neutral effects, the better we are, not just to ourselves, but to our families or to our employers. So I think that level of critical thought is really, really important.
I mean, I don't want to kind of go down the ChatGPT rabbit hole, but I mean, I've been finding ChatGPT just unbelievably helpful.
Yes.
In terms of critical thought, in terms of almost using it as an intern at the moment, because it does spill out some interesting information. But, the thought of AI helping us to do our jobs in a better way, to inspire information, it's been really helpful for me, just across social media, across ideation.
Well, these things are there as tools, and it's like metaverse and immersive technology. At the end of the day, they have been invented. You can't uninvent them. I think one of the things that actually I didn't address the question you asked me earlier is that the local, we've set up the Metaverse for Education Training Open Standards. What we need to learn with both AI or with immersive technology, and then the two will come together as well, is take examples of very fast-moving technology such as social media. So social media gets a lot of flack for negative stuff that comes out of it, as does the internet. But on the other side, social media has a lot of really good positives. A friend of mine, her father-in-law has dementia and he disappeared. They were able to go onto Facebook, put a picture on him, and then a woman in Cottingham, which is where I live, said, I think I've just seen your father-in-law on the bus, and they're able to get there and find him.
That's amazing.
I know that's only one example, and I know that there are other examples.
Many. And also I think being intentional about who you're following as well can really help. Just keep it a positive space. It doesn't have to be negative. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think as well, we also need to learn the negatives. So we do know that there have been, with mental health issues, with some, I don't want to, certain imagery that comes up on things, maybe on how we should look or how we should be, can affect people's mental health. And I think that we should learn from these things. We should learn also from how they can be abused, such as online bullying and things like that. How do you actually manage that and stay within the constraints of free speech, but also make sure that younger people are more resilient to the fact that if this happens, how to handle it at that point, and how to come away from it and not have your life wrapped into these things.
We're all learning collectively, aren't we, about how that should be. And I think that would be the same with AI,
Yeah. And I agree with you with AI. AI is an incredible tool. And I was reading a thing that I'm sure you did the other day on detection of breast cancer. and it can scan through a load of images, and was actually getting a higher detection rate of early stage breast cancer than really experienced doctors were.
It's amazing.
That's not a bad thing, is it?
So what tools do you tend to use to overcome challenges in your life? Because I'm sure there have been very many.
The greatest thing in life is to help you overcome your problems, your friends and your family. You know, I just think people who are around you that keep you real, that cheer you up when you think that things are particularly bad or whatever's happening, that help you gain your self-belief if that wobbles. So, you know, to me personally, I think that having a healthy relationship with other human beings is one, whether it's at work, and more importantly with your partners, you've got children, if you've got children, if you're parents, all of those people who can give you advice and who look out for you. I think that's really important. I also think as well, you know, try to step away for a while, whether it's exercising, whatever, just try to cleanse that mental space and jump out. I think as far as tools go as well, turn them off if they're phones.
Every now and again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true.
You know, as you get older, those people that make you feel good, and you learn as you get older those people who put you down and make you feel shit.
Yeah.
Sorry for swearing. So not to be totally surrounded. What I'm not recommending at all is to sort of like live in a vacuum of just people telling you what you want to hear, because that's absolutely not the case. But you want people who are telling you, giving you advice that you need to hear, that are giving it to you with your best interests at heart, and they give that, even if it's not something you want to hear. So surround yourself with people like that.
Oh, I love that. That's a great answer. I'm feeling very inspired by that answer.
Well, you're from that fabulous family. You've got loads of options, haven't you? So
I've got lots of options. I love that. Yeah, I've got a lovely big family and lots of options. And they definitely tell the truth.
Yeah, oh yeah. As do mine.
Yes, it's the best way. And Lindsay, what kind of leader would you say you are? Because obviously you're part of all these groups. You're joint MD. You're co-founder. You know, you're leading in a lot of different capacities. So, how do you like to lead?
I think it's very important for leaders to communicate and listen. So, and also try and surround themselves with the best people you can. And more important, not just surround yourself with the best people, but for God's sake, listen to them. So there's no point having people that surround you and you give you advice and you don't listen. What I always try to do is listen to what people say, and then from that actually decide, going back to that critical thought, what are the best things to take forward from what they're telling me. Also, never, ever, and it's really hard to hear this, be afraid to admit that if you thought you were doing something and somebody comes along and tells you it's not a good idea and that shouldn't be done, to listen to them and change course. You know, if you're doing something wrong, we can all do things wrong. And don't be afraid to be told that.
When have you grown the most in your life? You know, have you been through failures where you've looked back and then thought, actually, I did learn a lot from that failure, even though it hurt like hell when I was going through it?
Well, I'm only 5'6". I never really grew very much anyway, physically. A lot of those old adages are really true, aren't they? You know, you do. Is it really a good thing if look at success and failure and treat both the imposters the same, that sort of thing. So you do learn an awful lot when you get things wrong. You learn a lot more than when you get things right. That doesn't matter whether it's in business or whether it's in personal relationships or whatever.
Why do you think we're so obsessed with not talking about failure? Because I do think it's something the Americans are really good at, and they've got really good at it. And yet the Brits, sometimes we kind of like to gloss over things. I mean, I'm speaking from personal experience. I've got better at talking about failure, having gone through big things that I've failed at.
Yeah, and I have a healthy catalogue of failures, as I can tell you. Originally, I went to university in clinical psychology. I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. So it's always very intriguing to me. But I always sort of view this a little bit like, if you get a vaccine, your body learns by taking a bit of poison, and it learns to fight against that, right? So that's what a vaccine is, or even if you actually get the illness itself. And I sort of think your brain's a bit like that as well. So if it's always being positively reinforced, and everything's great, and everything's fantastic, it never builds resilience. When something goes really wrong, it sort of, as your body does when it's fighting a virus, your brain goes into its fight-back survival mode. I'm not saying that everyone does, so I don't want to sound sort of blasé when I'm saying this, but you learn from that. When things go wrong, you actually then have to really learn to fight back, and you learn more about yourself as to what you can and you can't do at that point. And so I sort of think of it a bit like that. I think that your mental resilience is akin to your physical resilience, I guess. I mean, I would say that any failure is, the lesson, never walk away from a failure and just say, close the book on it. Go back to it and say, why did I fail? But more importantly, to all of our failures, there was often a lot of nuggets of really good stuff that come out of it as well. You learnt stuff by failing. So pick up all the good stuff and take it forward with you, and then learn from why it didn't succeed.
Yeah, that's just great advice. When you're in the phase that you're calling the failure, it's all about what you're labeling it, isn't it? So it's kind of that learning curve that you can just take so many learnings and just think, right, I'm just going to use this for learning purposes, and let's move, let's keep moving forward.
And I think you do. I would, not that I would wish it on anyone at all, because none of us would ever wish anyone to go through a difficult time. No. But inevitably, life throws all sorts of things our way, doesn't it? And sometimes it throws the hardships with us. And I think it's just sort of being prepared for that. And the more prepared you are, and when you come out of it, always look at, how do I come out of this stronger, even if it hurts like hell at the time.
Yeah, and you think, the other thing I always think, if I'm going through something hard and, failing, or I'm telling myself I'm failing, I just think you've got to just pick yourself up, haven't you, and keep moving on.
Like you, my mother's from a agricultural background, and as you know, in nature and in farming, life, it's not that it's black and white, but you either kill it and die, or you get it and get out there and get on with it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that maybe that's one of the lessons that she taught me. Yeah. Do
you think if you'd become a psychologist, that would have been your prescription? Just get up and get on with it.
Seriously, probably maybe we just need a little bit more of that being said to people at the moment. The key thing with any of these things is actually the diagnosis, and we've expanded diagnosis into something, say, like mental health. So I guess there is a difference between normal human emotions of feeling depressed, or feeling sad, or whatever those things might be, which to some extent or another was starting to class some of those as mental illness. But then there is mental illness that's on the scale of it, which is, feeling upset and depressed is quite a human reaction. Actually, being bipolar and being depressed is a clinical illness and I suppose it's differentiating between the two. And I guess it's building up mental resilience, maybe in that first half of it, that we should collectively, particularly for younger people, maybe as a society, try to work on a little bit. These things are actually quite normal, but for you to be experiencing as you're growing up, we've both been I know my case is some time ago, teenagers, it's a difficult period of time, your brain is changing, your body is changing, all those sorts of things. And you can generally feel angry and upset at everything that's going on. And I think that maybe just saying that these things are just normal.
And also talking about them a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
making it normal to talk about it,
Yeah, and I think actually young people on the whole actually pretty good at that.
If you could give talking of being a teen or a younger person, if you could give your 21-year-old self some advice, what would you say to him?
I'm quite young for my years. I'm born at the end of August. I finished university when I was 20, so I started working when I was 21. I would always just fall back to a bit of advice that my dad gave me, and he always said, like, you only hear once, life's not a rehearsal. And I think you probably don't realise that when you're young. You think that it's just an endless... Maybe just understand that, to be a bit more confident, all of those things that you probably don't quite get at that age, because you think it's just... I'd probably say to him, don't be such a twat as well.
Be nicer to girls.
Yes.
I'm sure you always were.
Well, actually, I started going out when we were 15 and 16, so believe me.
Melissa's Lindsay's lovely wife.
Yes. So if I hadn't been nicer to girls, believe me, she would have let me know. So I think I've already learned that one.
That's brilliant. Well, lucky you. What values are important to you when it comes to your business and your working life, as well as family, obviously?
As far as it comes to business, just remember, the business is a business and it has to operate as such. Yeah, it's got to be, when you employ people, it's got to be profitable, it needs to be run well, it needs to be have a forward-thinking approach to how it runs. So on that sort of, on the mechanics of the business, don't forget that this is not a social club, it is a business. On the other side of that, which it addresses what I've just said and maybe spins it a bit, is be communicative with the people that you work with, respectful of the people that you work with. Always don't ask people to do things that you wouldn't be prepared to do yourself. And that's one of the things that my father taught my brothers and I. He set Garth West up himself from scratch. Try to be a good employer, firm and fair.
If you had just one message you can leave our listeners with, what would that be?
On deathbed regrets, there's an assumption that most people, it sounds awfully morbid, doesn't it? But
as we're talking about, it's not a rehearsal. Let's talk about it. Let's go.
90% of deathbed regrets are not about what we've done, but about what we didn't do. Actually, and that's, most people would actually think that it was the other way around. So I would say, within the context of business, setting up businesses, trying to, I know that you've been very successful. You've gone out on your own and done things like that. So
it's not an easy process, as you know.
But again, going back to our wiser elder generations, as my mother used to always say, is what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen if you don't do it? Is you come to the end of your life and you think, I wish I tried that. I wrote a book. It was absolute crap.
Oh, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. And
what was the book about?
Oh, to be honest with you,
I can't remember.
It was a murder and stuff in London. Okay.
Wow.
And but the whole thing that I learned out of that experience was, I have written a book, yes. Will I write another book? No, because I'm not very good at it. I learned, but I can always say I've written a book. I've written a film script and various other things like that. But I did these things, and I learned a lot about it. I know how films are made now. I know how you can. I know a lot of people who love books, and they go and see the film about it, say, "Oh, there's so much missing." Well, that's why I learned a lot about story arcs. And
don't you find those types of things, those types of endeavours, where you just innately desire to do it, and then looking back, whenever it might be, 5-10 years later, you're like, oh God, this is actually really useful. I learned about story arcs. I can actually market my business. I can talk about, talk on a podcast. I can tell stories. I sometimes find that you do these random things and then actually it becomes super useful at a specific time in your life.
And that goes back to all that stuff about failing and succeeding. All of that stuff that you fail at, all of those lessons come back to you. I know that I'm not ever going to be a best-selling author because I can't write stuff that's good enough. It is a very good learning, yes.
Is there anything else you'd like everyone to know?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest way to find me, so that's Lindsay, Scottish spelling, West. Obviously the two businesses are Garth West Limited in Hull and VISR Dynamics, or visor-vr.com. My final thing is that total hats off to you for getting business leaders together in Yorkshire. We need to stand up and be strong with our collective voice together. I think we need to have a pan-Yorkshire voice, even though we have our areas of expertise. We really are a part of the country that has been pivotal in the success of our country as a whole. And I think we have an incredible future ahead of us if we remember our history and build on that for the future.
That's fantastic, Lindsay. Thank you so much. And I'm super inspired by all your answers and especially that parting message. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, yours too, Rachel. Thank you.